It is the morning of September 9th, 1990. The Freeport of Monrovia smells of rust and sea salt. Smoke hangs above the water where ships once carried rubber and iron ore. Now the docks are a battlefield. Soldiers in torn fatigue stand behind sandbags, waiting for a convoy. They whisper one name, Samuel Kanyon Doe. For 10 years, Doe has ruled Liberia with fear. He believes the men waiting ahead are peacekeepers, that the meeting will save him. His convoy crawls toward the port, tires crunching over shattered glass. The moment he steps out, rifles rise. A burst of gunfire fills the air. His guards fall. He is seized and dragged toward the warehouses. Rebel leader Prince Johnson sits in a plastic chair, a can of beer in his hand. Around him, his men jeer and shout questions. Doe trembles, still trying to speak, still believing words can save him. The tape does not cut. The questioning becomes humiliation, then violence. Blood stains the floor. Johnson watches in silence, his eyes fixed on the camera, as if performing for it. Outside, Monrovia burns, but inside this room, history narrows to a single image, a dictator cornered and broken while the world watches through a lens. By nightfall, Samuel Doe is dead. The footage travels from hand to hand, copied onto cassette after cassette. Within days, television screens across the world show the same grainy scene. Power in Liberia no longer ends with a salute or a speech. It ends with a videotape. It does not happen overnight. The fall of Monrovia begins slowly, through hunger, betrayal, and exhaustion. Government soldiers guard only a few streets around the executive mansion, firing sporadically into the distance. The rest of the city is already gone, split between warring factions, filled with the smoke of burning homes and the sound of distant gunfire.
I'm here against my will because of war in Liberia. That's how I'm here. I'm suffering. Everybody, all the refugees are suffering, not my one.
Liberia's tragedy begins long before the first shell lands on Monrovia. In the early 19th century, freed slaves from America arrived on its shores, founding a nation built on the promise of liberty. But that promise is never shared. The Americo-Liberian elite ruled the country for more than a century, while the indigenous majority remains voiceless and poor.
Disait la situation des réfugiés. Donc, il ne faut pas de temps.
A 28-year-old master sergeant named Samuel Kanyon Doe and a group of soldiers storm the executive mansion. They killed President William Talbot and execute 13 of his ministers on the beach, accusing them of corruption. The coup shocks the world. For the first time, an indigenous Liberian leads the country. To many, Doe's rise feels like justice, a chance to end decades of exclusion and arrogance. But power changes quickly. Within months, the man who promised freedom begins to rule through fear. Doe surrounds himself with loyal soldiers from his own Kran ethnic group and fills the army with men who owe him their lives. In 1985, he held elections and declared victory with impossible numbers. When the opposition protests, his troops open fire on the crowd. Bodies fill the streets of Monrovia. The more he tightens his grip, the more the country slips away. As corruption grows, soldiers loot villages and harass civilians. Ethnic tensions deepen, fueled by years of favoritism and violence. In the far north, a former government minister named Charles Taylor builds an army in exile. On Christmas Eve 1989, his fighters crossed the border from Côte d'Ivoire, calling themselves the National Patriotic Front of Liberia. They promised to overthrow Doe and free the nation from tyranny. Within months, Taylor's forces seized towns and villages across the countryside. The army collapses, leaving Doe isolated in the capital. In desperation, He orders mass arrests and executions of anyone suspected of sympathizing with the rebels. Hundreds are killed, many simply for belonging to the wrong tribe. His brutality only strengthens the rebellion. By mid-1990, Monrovia was encircled. Food runs out. Hospitals stop operating. Shells fall near the port, and thousands of civilians hide in churches and schools. In August, peacekeepers from neighboring countries arrive, calling themselves ECOMOG, the Economic Community Monitoring Group. They come to stop the bloodshed. Doe believes they have come to protect him. He does not see how little power he has left. His ministers have fled. His army is in ruins. His people no longer obey his orders. Across the city, another commander, Prince Johnson, once Taylor's ally but now his rival, watches and waits. He wants to be the one to end the war by ending Samuel Doe. And so, when the sun rises on September 9th, 1990, the stage is set. A convoy leaves the executive mansion, headed for the Freeport of Monrovia. The president believes he is walking into a meeting with peacekeepers. In truth, he is walking into history, toward the room, the camera, and the end of his rule. He arrives in a convoy of battered jeeps, his soldiers nervous, eyes darting at every corner. The President of Liberia steps out wearing a camouflage uniform and his signature red beret. His men fan out around him, still believing this meeting will bring protection. Doe walks toward the entrance of the warehouse where the Nigerian commander of ECOMOG waits to greet him. For a brief moment, it feels almost calm. Then, chaos. The whine of trucks outside, followed by the heavy rattle of gunfire. Fighters burst through the perimeter shouting orders, their faces hard with exhaustion and dust. These are not peacekeepers. They are soldiers of the Independent National Patriotic Front of Liberia, led by Prince Johnson. Within seconds, the meeting turns into an ambush. Those guards are overpowered, forced to the ground, their rifles kicked away. Doe himself is struck and shoved toward the door as bullets tear through the air. Witnesses later say the entire firefight lasts less than 5 minutes. When the shooting stops, Samuel Doe, the head of state, is no longer a guest of the peacekeepers. He is a prisoner, bound and bleeding. He is dragged toward the waiting trucks outside. Someone raises a video camera and presses record. What begins here, inside the port of Monrovia, is not a battle or a negotiation. It is a performance meant for the lens. The dictator who once ruled through televised speeches now faces his own final broadcast. The rebels drive Doe to their compound in Caldwell, a short distance from Freeport. The ride is rough. He's already wounded from the gunfight, bleeding heavily from his leg and side. When they arrive, he's half carried, half dragged into a concrete room with no windows. A single light bulb swings from the ceiling. Men crowd the space, shouting orders, laughing, and recording everything with a handheld camera. At the center sits Prince Johnson, the INPFL leader. He leans back in a chair, a beer in one hand and a walkie-talkie in the other. Around him, his soldiers chant his name. Doe is forced to sit on the floor. His hands are bound. His voice shakes as he tries to plead for his life. Johnson begins asking questions about massacres, about stolen money, about Doe's killing of the previous government ministers a decade earlier. He mocks Doe's belief in traditional protection charms and accuses him of sorcery. When Doe denies it, the men around him begin to cut him with knives, taunting him to prove he is human. The torture continues for hours. Soldiers slice off Doe's ear, shouting that they want to see if his supposed juju can protect him. They pour beer into his wounds. Johnson keeps the interrogation going, sometimes asking questions, talking to the cameraman. His voice is eerily calm. At one point, Johnson leans toward the lens and says, "He killed my people." Behind him, Doe slips in and out of consciousness. He is beaten, humiliated, and forced to answer questions until his voice breaks. Outside, the sounds of war still echo. Gunfire, explosions, the shouts of other factions closing in. But inside that room, the camera keeps rolling. The video captures everything, from Doe's pleas to his final collapse. By evening, Samuel Kanyon Doe is dead, either from blood loss or execution. The exact moment is never seen clearly. After Doe's death, Johnson's men display his body briefly before wrapping it in cloth. The footage is duplicated and distributed across Monrovia almost immediately. Within days, the Doe execution tape is sold in street markets and broadcast abroad. For many Liberians, it's the first time they see a ruler brought down not by an army or an election, but by raw, unfiltered violence. The shock spreads far beyond Liberia. International news outlets air portions of the video, blurring or cutting the most graphic parts. The images of a drunken Prince Johnson, beer in hand, directing the interrogation of a bleeding president, become one of the most disturbing symbols of the Liberian Civil War. But Doe's death doesn't bring peace. Instead, it deepens the chaos. Charles Taylor, Johnson's former ally turned rival, continues his advance, claiming he alone can restore order. Monrovia remains divided. MPFL in one sector, MPFL in another, Ecomog holding the center. For years afterward, the video of Doe's death becomes both a warning and a myth. Some see it as justice. Others see it as the day Liberia lost its soul.